Don's speech today will focus on his duty in Laos. Introduce Don Cherry.
First of all, my talk is just going to be on the first tour I had in Laos. And just to jump to the end of it, I got to within 4 days of being relieved, and a young man that I had been training to take over our fresh breeze operation got killed, and I had to stay another 10 weeks. But to get on with Laos, I just want to show you geographically where it's located. It's totally inland in Southeast Asia. Here is Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Burma, and China up here. It's landlocked. And the Hmong, who I worked with most predominantly, came out of China about 3,000 years ago. And the locals have picked up the Laotian people, picked up on the term Mao, which in our context refers to slave people. And they really do not like that expression. They prefer their own tongue, Hmong, H''M''O''N''G. This is Vientiane, that's the administrative capital of Laos, which, by the way, let me give you a little geography lesson while we're at it. Vientiane is right down here. And the royal capital is up here at Luang Prabang. And I have been literally all over the country. My second tour out there, I was director of intelligence for the entire country. But in 65, 66, I went into Laos to help you set it in time before the first Marines went into South Vietnam. Does that help place you in history as to how primitive things were? We had no air sea rescue service there. I would use Air America and my men teams that were out on the grounds in the rescue of any downed airmen. And you get that first one back, you say, man, I paid for my retirement, you know? Well, we recovered 42 downed airmen from hostile territory during that first tour I was there. When I arrived there, there were 12 of us for the whole country. I was an Air Force technical intelligence officer up to that point, having a lot to do with our satellite reconnaissance. I worked on some of the first satellites that were recovered, and my people were able to talk directly to the people who physically made and designed the reconnaissance satellites and say, hey, it doesn't do this, it does do this, we like it doesn't do this, and so forth. And I went from that into the spook school, had some exercises at a place called the Farm, and then went to Southeast Asia. I got off the plane, I really didn't know what I was going to be doing. And I still am really not sure because nobody ever told me. You were told to go up country and do what needed to be done. Okay. And if you needed some help, call and ask. And when I arrived, it was taking Air Force jets 6 days to 6 weeks to get on a target reported by a roadwatch team. I had been there 6 weeks when I had it where I could have strike aircraft overhead of a target in 6 minutes. This is the Royal Laotian flag. And this is what it looks like from the air. I live down there. This is part of the Plain of Jars, but we're off to the west of the Plain of Jars. PDJ it's called. This was my home most of the time in Laos. It's only about 60 miles into enemy territory. This is called Lima Site 98 or 20 alternate. I'll explain that to you in a minute. Quite an enclave there. See that building right there? Not the one at the end, but this one right here, the small building. That's at the end of the runway. Right up here, behind that piece of karst, you see a white kind of rooftop. That's my house. This is just looking at it from another angle, a little higher. No, leave it there.
You need a lump on the end.
Oh, to make it show a little
Yeah.
better, okay. This is the king's house up here, when the king would come to visit, which happened once while I was there. There's my house, and out back here, that little area there is a 55-gallon fuel drum hung on its side that had a shower head sticking out one end of it, and two candle-type flame holders that would heat the water. And our houseboy would start heating the water about 5 in the evening, and we'd get in, 7, 8 o'clock, and at least you could have a hot shower. But it wasn't exactly primitive living, but there were any place from 4 to 8 of us living in here over a period of time. Going up there in the morning, the pilot would have to fly like this and then dive down through the clouds once he heard and saw something he recognized, so he knew where the rocks were. Those clouds have rocks in them, and it's kind of tough. When I say pilot, I'm speaking of Air America pilots. This is Lima Site 36, and up here, you'll see some other pictures up in here, where I'm looking at some of the entrenchments they have around it, and you would say the inspector's not exactly happy. Here's one of the aircraft coming in. This is just one of the many types of aircraft I flew in. This was my major method of transportation. These are former Marine Corps H-34 helicopters. They did get you around the countryside. This is where I stayed when I was there, and you see the revetments around here, trenches. But you're about 90 miles into enemy territory at that point. This is how close the enemy could get to you. That flag is flying over that main building, and the airfield dropped down behind you there. This is what I found in the way of protection. The ammunition just lying out like that. Look at the rust and corrosion on the bullets. Those are mortar rounds. This is just laying out in the field. You can see where I got agitated. Now, could you believe I was upset? Jet, my interpreter, took this picture. I was having a little conversation with the man in charge, who's a local. And I didn't really like what I saw. I was known as Fresh Breeze, Project Fresh Breeze. My code name was Loop. Loop is pool spelled backwards, and I spent all my free time at the Air America swimming pool, and that's where they got the pool out of it. Had to fly to your job. This is Pop Buell's Site 20 alternate. You had to land coming in from down here. This road that goes across there is below the end of the airstrip. It dropped, the side of the hill just drops off steeply there. You land going on this way, and when you get to here, you go uphill. And then it levels off, and then you go up another hill, and it levels off, and you got to stop it by that point. Then you taxi back down over here to Pop Buell's place, and then when you're leaving, you go back up here, and you come down the hill, and you come down the hill, and you go, and hope you got enough airspeed to get off the ground, because you run out of ground.
Well, what was the length of that airstrip?
Not enough. I really do not know.
I mean, like a football field?
A little longer than that, yeah. This gives you an idea, another type of the airfields we went in and out of. This is a T-28, but you notice it's got machine gun in underneath the wing and bomb racks. Now, see this insignia? See the two black lines on each side of it? If we were going to fly that plane down to Thailand to be refurbished or anything, this Laotian insignia would slip up, and you'd put Thai insignia down in there. So we turned it from a Laotian airplane into a Thai airplane. If we were going down to Don Muang, which is at Bangkok, we'd put an American insignia in there. That way you could land at an American base.
Who built that plane?
I really don't know. But it sure did a good job, I'll say that. This is more than just a C-47. This is a gunship. This was the first gunship used in Laos. And we were able to have the successful evacuation of 525 people from a Hmong encampment. And it was one of those deals where I called Saigon, and we'd never used gunships up in Laos before. And I was talking to a Masonic friend of mine, and I said, Floyd, we've got to have some gunships. And I used a special Masonic phrase, and he says, they'll be up there this afternoon. We had 2 of them, and they would fly 4 hours on station, and they would guard these people as they came out. There's a C-46. You don't see many of those. And this one, about 2 months after I took this picture, ran into the side of a mountain. Flew straight into it. Of course, he was surrounded by clouds at the time. This is a C-119. We use those as gunships. There's a 123. We would jump out of these. Notice they've got special jet engines out here on the thing. That helped them in short takeoff and landing situations.
Was that able to use your runway?
This is at Lima Site 98, yes. I'm taking this, by the way, from the King's House. This is C-45. This is something that Air America used to fly, quote, dignitaries, unquote, around the country. Here's a C-130, great airplane. I mean, fantastic. I made the first night jumps in Europe out of a C-130. By the way, I've got 137 parachute jumps, none in this country. And something that scares old Army jumpers, and if there's any here, I apologize to you, but 61 of my jumps are at night from helicopters from 800 feet. I was training Hmong guerrillas for night insertion. I'll show you my jump school here in a little while. We had Navy people. Does anybody know the designation of this? I think it's an A8 or something of that nature. And that's an Airborne Command and Control Center up here. These guys would come in and they would fly over the Laotian territory and point out targets to the fighter jets that would come in. And I went up with them one day just to see what their operation was like. Had cloud cover, and we did nothing but bore a hole in the sky for 12 days. So for 12 hours. So I didn't do that anymore. We did land to refuel once. This is a gunship. Shooting out the back door is a 120 millimeter field artillery piece, and it's controlled by what's called a black crow up in the front. The black crow can pick out hot points on the ground, take over and fly the airplane and fire the guns when the plane is in the right inclination for the shells to hit the target that the black crow is looking at. Quite a remarkable airplane. And Mr. McNamara wanted to know if we were killing them on the ground. That was all important to him. This is one of the helicopters I never had a chance to jump out of, but we did put in a TACAN up just beyond Lima Site 98. This is a Loach, a light observation helicopter, and it happens to be on top of Skyline Drive there above Long Chen or Lima Site 98. This is one of our Ravens. Helicopters were so much easier to travel in than the Laotian roads. And by the way, your speaker today has ridden every single mile of the railroads in Laos. There are none.
About the married ones.
Yeah, this is our standard transportation. That's a great helicopter. Most of them were given over from the Marine Corps, and instead of trashing them, turned them over to Air America, and a very, very efficient helicopter. This is a helioporter, a short takeoff and landing aircraft. I'm in a helicopter just like the one you see in the background, and we're going up to put this TACAN in. Tony Poe is not his name, he's Polish. His name is Polianarski, and nobody could pronounce it, so he just turned out to be Tony Poe. But I stayed up at Tony's house one time, which is right up close to Thai border and Thai Chinese border, not Thai, Lao Chinese border. And Tony, that morning, he says, "Hey, you like to go to China today?" I says, "Why not?" So we got up and walked about 3 miles, crossed the river, and he says, "Now you can tell your friends you've been to China." I says, "I was in China in 1949. He said, "Well, let's get the hell out of here. You could get killed for doing this."
What is that black thing on the table?
This is a Hmong village after it's been hit by the enemy. Nothing is left. Men, women, and children all killed on the spot. This is Skyline Drive before. This is the TACAN we put in, and that's the outpost up there at the top that protected it. Has a trench around it, and that's it. The TACAN is a tactical navigational direction finder. Pilots could zoom in on this and know exactly where they were. It would know where the pilot was, and they would know where the target that they were going for in North Vietnam and point them right to it. A very, very sensitive type thing.
What was your range on the TACAN there? Normally it's 195.
This was right at 200 miles, I was told, yes.
Okay.
And it was up on top of this hill here. This is out the back of the door, that 123. This is Thailand. You can tell just by how flat it is. Laos is very, very mountainous with very few flatlands. But this is a typical Hmong village. And it would be like that for maybe 2 years. I don't know of any that lasted longer than that. Then they would go elsewhere, and then a few years later, maybe they would come back to this same site.
Who was chasing them? The Chinese or what was causing them?
The Pathet Lao were the communist Laotians, and they were controlled by the North Vietnamese. China was active in Laos to the extent of supplying weaponry. I will show you the Chinese Cultural Center. This is one of the roads on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we asked them to clear a landing area for us. And so we said it had to be this long, so they cleared all of the flatland. It's about 4 times wider than it really needed to be. You think you're communicating, but you're not. This is observing strikes by T-28s by the Royal Laotian Air Force. There's Skyline Drive. This is that large piece of karst. You can just see a corner of the karst at the lower left-hand corner before you get to the end of the runway. Oh, for the Navy guys here, that's the USS Ticonderoga. And they were going into make strikes in Laos the very next day. And they wanted somebody that could tell them what to expect if they had to bail out, so I was picked. Well, there were 12 of us for the whole country, if that gives you an idea how thinly we were spread. This is a Soviet transport that landed at Wat Tai, which is the airfield at Vientiane, and it was headed for Hanoi. And the Soviet ambassador assured my ambassador that no one got on or off of the plane while it was there. They were just waiting because there was an airstrike going on at Hanoi, and they couldn't fly in. They would be taking off just as soon. Well, I've been published in photography, and I do telephoto work with the Minox and things like that. But I had pictures of the local KGB guys getting on and off the airplane and other people getting on and off the airplane. And our ambassador gave my pictures to the Soviet ambassador when he was getting ready to leave to go home. Says, "I'm so glad that nobody got off of that plane while it was here." Now, this is 186 miles in enemy territory. That's General Vang Pao. The most respected general officer I ever knew. His troops always knew where he was because he was between them and the enemy. He was just that type of leader. And DP and I were the same age, and we got along just beautifully. He had a fantastic sense of humor. He took me to a dinner at his house where it was a buffet style, and you walked around this big table, and he would say, use your fork. So I'd use a fork. And next one he'd say, use your fingers. I'd use my fingers. The next one he'd say, use your knife. You know, and what he was doing is telling me exactly the wrong thing to pick up the stuff with.
Oh.
And the women around the other side were just back up on our mountaintop. We had ferried in a 105 millimeter howitzer, and we were using white phosphorus shells, and this was showing the aircraft where the target was. So they could see that from above because they knew where we were, and where they saw where our white phosphorus shells hit, they knew that was the point they needed to strike. Our helicopter pilot had heard we were under fire, so he didn't come in and pick us up until the next day. And this is the thing I'm telling you about. Right up here at the top, this is the officers' quarters, okay? Notice no other building is like that. I slept down here. That's a poncho used as a tent. And see right along the bottom here? This is the way they do the hand grenades. They pull the tops off of the cans, pull the pin on the grenade, so if you're attacked, all you have to do is throw the entire can down the hill, the grenade will fall out and go off. And I said to him, what happens if it falls off into the trench? And the guy thought and thought and thought. Be very bad. Yeah. This we brought in by helicopter, and this is what we were marking the target with. These were for T-28 strikes. This is where we went in to blow up a road. You see the little cave there in the side? That's man-made, and they're all around. When they were attacked, they would go in those holes, and they would be protected from aircraft fire. You see how they're marked on the road there. Again, we had Chinese weaponry we turned up in these places. And here's my guys. And coming back from Longchen one day, I heard on the radio in the helicopter that they'd found a cave full of ammunition. So I told the Air America pilot to land there. And being a, quote, customer, unquote, he had to go where the customer told him. And so we got out, we went in, and this whole cave full of, I think they estimated 40 tons of explosive that had been brought in from time to time. There's one of those little revetments. But my boss, Bill Lair of CIA, when he saw these pictures, he says, "Damn it, Don! You'd have been killed if that thing blown up. Do you realize how much paperwork I'd had to do to..." I said, "I wouldn't have worried about it, Bill. That's There's the cave. You could see how it could be easily overlooked. But,
And that emerald was put by the Pathet Lao, is that
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Under North Vietnamese direction, by the way.
Okay.
So what happened to that unit, those munitions?
The Hmong wanted to use what they could out of it, and then we blew up the rest. This, by the way, is, quote, a bridge on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This is another shot inside. There's that place where the little revetments were in the side. We just blew up that whole section of road so they couldn't use it anymore. But I'll always remember Longchen. It's got good and bad memories. I'll always remember the schools and the people who worked in them. I remember walking the B-52s down Skyline Drive. And there's my home in Laos. Like I say, only 60 miles into enemy territory. This is where my replacement was killed. They took one round in the engine as they were taking off. Cy and Dachar were both killed, slamming into the side of the hill there.